Hi guys, how you doing? Still awake? Up there in the back, in the cheap seats? All right. That's where I would be. So you guys may know me because I'm the guy who's been posting on Twitter the notes. Anyone been reading these things? All right. So we have a little bit of a logistical problem at the moment. I am here. So one of you is going to have to write the notes for what you think I talked about, and then you can send it to me, and I'll post it, and I'll put your name on it or something, because it's not going to work. I thought maybe I could have like a laptop here, and every 20 seconds I stop and go write something down, but that really wouldn't work very well theatrically. In 2003, I quit my job. It might have been an awesome job. You don't know where the story's going yet. Don't presume to know my story. It was a lousy job. Or at least it became lousy eventually. I had a 10-year career at a big corporation, and I loved my job for a while. But by the time I hit 30, 31, it was wearing thin, and I realized I needed to do something else. And I also realized that I had spent most of my young adult life prepping for the same thing. That's the way ambitious, smart children are raised. Do this, do that, plan for the future, set yourself up, major in this so you can get this job. But then once you hit middle age, which I did in 2003, you start to run out of things that you set up to plan for. And all the people around you, if you've been successful, I had a good job, a lot of my friends wish they had a job like it. All the people you know wish that they had ended up where you are, even though you want out. So I struggled when I realized I was not that happy anymore. What do I do about this? I started thinking about this word, this four-letter word, not those four-letter words, four-letter word called quit. And I started talking to my friends and family. I am thinking of quitting. And I discovered that that word divides people. It divided my parents. It divided my friends. When you say that word in our culture, American culture, that word means you're doing something wrong, generally. Winners never quit, quitters never win. I heard all this stuff from people, and I was really surprised where the support that I did get came from. It was often very unexpected. I wish I could go back and look at that version of me. I should introduce myself properly. I am a writer. I write books, as Chris mentioned. That's all that I do. I don't write books to support a business or to market some other product or thing. I am purely a writer. Books have changed my life many times, and I am thrilled, and I feel very fortunate. That's how I basically make a living. But I look back at that time when I was trying to quit, and I wish I could give myself some advice. This thing, these phrases I heard about quitting, these platitudes, these cliches, there's problems with them. When I talked about quitting, the winners never quit, quitters never win. I started thinking now that I'm on the other end of all this, I look back, I'm like, wait a second. That's totally not true. If I had come to my parents and said, Mom, Dad, I have a heroin addiction, I want to quit. Would they have said, no, don't quit, son. Quitters never win. If I had told them, hey, my wife beats me up every day. I want to quit this relationship. No, you should stay. You'll learn something by fighting through and enduring. No, of course not. So that's a problem with cliches. And now that we are at the tail end of all the speakers, and I'm sort of on the tail end, I've been trying to figure out how do I fit into all the stories you've heard. I think that my role for you is the cranky, curmudgeonly, creative thinker guy. That is my job for you, to give you more of a sassy point of view on all of this stuff. Be a little bit less affirmative, although I think there's positive things you can get out of my stories. So I'm going to talk to you about your creative soul and how to save your creative soul. I think your creative souls are in jeopardy. Clearly, some of you have some guilty feelings about the word soul. We'll come back to this in a second. But before I tell you more about creativity and your soul, a lot of the books I write are about ideas and how they work and how they function, how to develop them, and the history of different ideas. I want to tell you a different kind of story. And that story starts with some old friends who I've known them since college. And a year or two after I had quit, we had our annual meeting where we got together, and one of them was getting married, so it was sort of a bachelor party thing. We were a little bit too old to do like the crazy bachelor party. This was more of like an old middle-aged man bachelor party. And I got the job of picking the place that we stayed. The bachelor wanted to be in Austin. Any Austin people here? Cool. Very good. All of you up there in the back row are from Austin. Good to know. So this is Lake Travis, which many of you are any Lake Travis people. Is this your house? Anybody see their house here? So this house we were able to rent. I'm a writer. I have humble tastes. I'm much more of a D kind of person. I'd live in a tiny home. Writers don't need much. We're solitary creatures. If you give me some good some good rum and some good air conditioning and a quiet place, I can be happy and work. But for this thing, we're going to get together, we wanted a big party, so we're able to pool our money together and rent this glorious mansion. I have never been in a place like this before. I probably never will be in it again. It was like an MTV Cribs kind of place with 4 jacuzzis and 3 pools and 5 bars and a bar in the jacuzzi and 6 kitchens. It was amazing. And we're old friends. We see each other maybe once a year, and this is a special occasion. We got together, and we get there. We haven't seen each other in a long time. We're running around like little kids at summer camp. Except we're adults now, so it's at summer camp with no adult supervision. And we're running around, hey, we're finding foosball tables and all this stuff, and it's hot, it's Austin in the summer, so we jump in the pool, which you can see pictured here. We're having fun, we open a few beers, we're getting to know each other again, all the old stories. And someone points out this thing that's all the way down there by the water on the lake. There's a boathouse. There's, hey, look at the boathouse. And I look down, and I'm thinking, hey, maybe there's a yacht we can steal. We can get really crazy for the weekend. But there's no boat. The owners of this house were smart. Put the boat somewhere else during bachelor party weekend. But if you look on top of the boathouse, there's this tower. And on the tower is a trapeze. So about 20 feet off the ground, the boat tower, another 10 feet the trapeze, you can swing out over Lake Travis and jump in. And all of us have the same kind of juvenile mentality. We've been friends for a long time. And when you're with old friends, you revert for the first few days back to when you met each other. So we're all acting like 18. We're like, oh, who's going to jump first? We start wrestling with each other to run down there and jump in. And one guy goes, he gets on the trapeze, he swings out and jumps in. Second guy goes and jumps in. And I'm laughing so hard at how ridiculous it is, I fall behind. 2 of my friends get in front of me. They get up there. By the time I am there, a few feet away, I hear them debating. And they're doing the analytical, intellectualizing of a scary thing debate, which from my corporate career as a manager, I'm very familiar with. They're talking about, well, maybe we should hold a wide grip. Then you can go further out. No, a small grip is better because you have more control. And then they're talking about when you should jump, and they haven't jumped yet. So this is their way to postpone dealing with the challenge of asking the question, do I jump? Now, a few minutes ago, though, we all had this experience in the pool of this idea was really great. This is where the this story is a metaphor, by the way. It's not really an amazing movie-worthy story. Nothing explodes. It's not a Michael Bay film or anything like that. But we all have this experience of getting ideas in our head, and then we're in the moment where you start having to do the thing to apply the idea, and you're at the edge now, the first draft, writing the business plan, starting to write a screenplay, thinking about making a movie. When you start actually doing it, you look down, it's like, whoa. Back over there when I had the idea, it felt really, really good. It was an abstraction. It was ethereal. It's just out in the air in your brain, and it can be perfect, and it feels perfect. And some people polish those ideas in the abstract because it feels really good. And then they get to actually do it, and it doesn't feel good. There's something at stake now. That's why a lot of people talk about doing stuff again and again and again because it feels much better in their brain. So anyway, to finish this little story, these 2 friends, I hear them doing this debate, this story going back and forth. They're on the edge and they're talking about it. And I know if I get involved in this conversation, because it was really tempting how ridiculous it was, I wanted to have a counter argument to the trapeze angle theory. I decided if I get involved in this conversation, I am not going to jump. So I have to just not decide now. I'm not going to talk to them. I'm going to push my way and grab the trapeze, swing out, and jump in. And I did. I come back up, and they're still debating. And pretty soon, we're all making fun of them. I mean, we're, again, juvenile behavior. We're making fun of them. We're calling them chicken. And then this goes on another 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and we're starting to feel bad for them. We're offering them some cliche advice that you tend to offer your friends in these situations. Just don't think about it. Don't think about it. When you say don't think about it to someone who's clearly stuck thinking about stuff, all they're going to do is think about not thinking about it. You can't win. But that's the kind of things that we say, these cliches. Just do it. Same thing. And then we realize that it's getting hot out. We've offered our advice. We tried to help them. We go back to the pool. And I remember sitting in the pool. This is the most important part of the story. I remember sitting in the pool. The sun is starting to set. They've been there for an hour. And I had 2 completely different thoughts. One thought was I was impressed. I'd be far too embarrassed to spend that much time visibly struggling with something. I was impressed in a good way. I really don't mean to make fun of them. I was like, wow, I would feel so much peer pressure. I would walk off. And maybe I'd try to confront the problem a different way. The second thing I thought, though, is that they've been there for an hour. It's getting harder and harder for them to realize that the reality of the situation is not up here in their brain. It's not an intellectual problem. Everyone understands how trapeze work. Like it's nothing technical. But it's satisfying for people who are smart, which all of you are, people who are educated and successful in most kinds of jobs. It's satisfying to stay in that intellectual place and believe these problems are solved purely through logic and reason. But when you're out there, the thing that's stopping you is not your higher brain, it's something else. You could call it intuition, you could call it your guts, your instincts, maybe you'd call it your subconscious, maybe even you'd call it your soul. There's some other part of who you are that is detached from what your brain is thinking it wants to do. And to sit there and fight it and fight it and fight it and pound your head again is not going to solve the problem because it's not up here. It's somewhere else. And I'm going to come back to the story about the lake and my friends in a couple of minutes. My second story for you, and I only have 5 stories to tell you, they're loosely woven together, is about a work of art that Yoko Ono did called the ceiling painting. Yoko Ono actually, apparently, as the story goes, this is how John Lennon and Yoko Ono met. That he came to a gallery, she was showing her work, and this was one of the works of art that he saw. And the work of art is interactive. It's a stepladder, and as you all know, if you've used a stepladder, you climb up the stepladder, and every step you take, it gets narrower and narrower, and you feel less and less secure, and you start thinking about, who exactly makes stepladders? Like, what kind of training do you get when you make the stepladders? You know, what third world country makes these things now, you know? How much did I pay for the stepladder? So you walk up the stepladder, and you get to the top, and you've kind of, all right, I'm stable now. But this piece of work, there's a magnifying glass suspended from the ceiling. So you have to reach up, you know, get the magnifying glass, and then you're supposed to hold it and look up at this painting that's on the ceiling. The whole project is meant to make you feel uncomfortable on purpose. It seems inviting enough, but as you're doing it, it doesn't feel good. It feels wrong. You feel like you're going to fall. And the painting is actually incredibly simple. All that there is, you have to look carefully to find it, there's one handwritten word, and that word just says yes. Tiny little word, yes. Now, art gets a bad reputation, I think, in America. We don't generally get exposed much to art. I think Shannon spoke yesterday about the importance of public art, and I totally agree with her. So much of the art that we see, we're told already what it's supposed to mean and how it's supposed to affect us. And that's really not what art should be. You should have to figure it out for yourself. That's what the pleasure of art is. What does this mean? What do I feel about this? So to me, this painting is about this other part, this other way of thinking about positive influence, positive thinking. All the cliches that we hear, these big, powerful banners of you can do it and positive stuff, that stuff is valuable and it gets us excited. But when you're actually in the moment yourself, there's some other kind of resource you need. And so the lesson I learned from this is that there's a kind of yes that I have to always work to find that's going to make me uncomfortable on the way to do it. To get the kind of yes that's going to make me write the next chapter, that's going to get me through that feeling of uncertainty. I don't know where this book's going to go or how I'm going to write this thing. There's work I have to do, and I have to be comfortable with the discomfort creative work is going to cause me. Now, my third story for you has to do with the plethora, the huge abundance we have of information about creativity. And this slide says, cursed by an abundance. It's a little bit too negative even for me. We're also blessed by this abundance. In the history of civilization, this is the greatest time ever to be a creator. We have access to books and courses and seminars and documentaries and behind-the-scenes specials. Every DVD comes with a behind-the-scenes movie. They show you how it was made. You can learn tremendous volumes about filmmaking just by watching all that stuff. 500 years ago, the Renaissance, we still romanticize the Renaissance. Comparatively, that was a horrible time to be a creative. You were not well educated. Most people couldn't read. There's a good reason why so much of the artwork you see from that era all looks the same. With old, white, wealthy people who look kind of angry, with like fluffy clothing and expensive stuff behind them, just looking at you, the viewer. And you have to wonder, what is that about? Well, those are the only people that had the money to pay artists to do artwork. There was no Kickstarter. There was no web. So today, as hard as it is to make stuff and start stuff and find an audience, those things are not trivial. But you can do it all on your own. You can do it with what's in your phone. All of you right now could be making a feature-length film or writing a book or a screenplay or anything, just with what's on your phone. And when you're done, you can push a button and the whole planet can see it, independent of what the local baron says, independent of what the Pope says. Michelangelo, Da Vinci, all those guys had to work through this horrible political network just to get funded to do stuff, and we don't have those problems. But the curse of all this, the curse of the abundance we have about how much information we have about ideas and how they work and the biographies you can read about a heroic entrepreneur that inspires you want to hear their story is something that's called narrative bias. So the term narrative bias, it's a cognitive psychology term that refers to, the more general term is something called cognitive bias. And the basic idea, it's a fancy word, the basic idea is simple. We all know that our vision has blind spots. There's certain parts of our vision that you really can't see, and your brain does some stuff to make it so you don't notice. We also know about optical illusions. There's certain patterns that our brain and our eyes just can't recognize. Cognitive bias is the same thing, it's the same idea applied to how you think. And you can do a Google search for cognitive bias and read all about this long list of very well-documented research about the biases our brains have. One of them is called narrative bias. And narrative bias is our proclivity and obsession for stories. We love stories, we crave them. That's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just that's the primary basis for how our brains work. We love to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. We love to have a hero. We love the 3-act structure. If you take a course on book writing or novel writing or screenplay writing, they go over and over arcs of story. And that's partly to do because of how our brains function. We want there to be a likable, interesting person. They go into a crisis, they come out, and they're victorious. That is the playbook for every blockbuster, almost every blockbuster American action film in the last 50 years. And we complain about it too. Why is every blockbuster the same? The reason why has to do in part because of the wiring of our brain. Those stories will always be popular for us. And that means when you're trying to read about creativity, you're trying to read about entrepreneurship, the books that are going to be the most popular are going to be ones that satisfy our narrative biases. There's nothing in the universe that says, simply because we as a species like stories, that all things that make good stories are the most true ways to understand how the world works. That's the problem with bias. So there's this experience I know that I had when I first started trying to write, and it's an experience I've had when I've coached people, or I've talked about creativity, where you go to an event like this, a great event, so many interesting people who have inspiring stories, and you listen, and you're charged by that. You're like, wow, that's amazing. I now feel inspired. I want to go and try to do that myself, and that's good. That gets you started, it gets you going. You feel this connection, you feel like you can do it. But then you sit down and write, or make a play or a movie, anything. You sit down to work and you feel that excitement, that motivation, you start doing the stuff, you're doing the stuff. And it's going along, and it goes good for a while, and then eventually, it's not that fun anymore. It starts to feel like work. When you were listening to the talks, when you were watching the show, the movie, it was all excitement. But now it just feels like work. And most people in that moment start to feel like they're doing something wrong. This doesn't feel good. Maybe I should read another book. Maybe there's a secret I am missing. There's some cliche I need to hear a platitude. There's 6 more secrets I need to read about. 6 more killer secrets. The thing about the secret thing that I find fascinating is the narrative bias thing. We so are compelled by secret stories. If I, as a writer, publish a book that's a secret, it's not a secret anymore. That's the definition of the word. And most of the time, the stuff in the book wasn't a secret to the people who told the person who wrote the book about it. Anyway, whole other talk about marketing and narrative bias. They come together. It explains clickbait on the web and on Twitter, that we're suckers for this stuff, even though we know it's not really the substance that we need. So people end up with this thing where they're working, it doesn't feel right, and the natural thing to do then is to go back and start consuming again, to want to read another story, because that feels much better than actually doing the work of following through on an idea. So that's narrative bias. There's another kind of bias that I want to tell you about, but before I tell you about it, I want to play a game with you. Will you play a game with me? Okay, so I need the house lights up, at least a little bit. It feels kind of like being a deity that you can just make light appear. Okay, so I'd like everybody to stand up. It's on the charter when you get asked to speak here that at least once during your presentation, you have to make everybody stand. So if I want my hotel tab to be picked up, I had to make sure I did that. You can all sit down. No, I'm kidding. Okay. All right, so we're going to play a game, and the game's very simple. Actually, before that, just stretch out. You've been sitting for a little while. Just put your arms up. Very good. You may need your arms in this. Look to your left. Say hello. If you don't like how they look, turn to your right. Say hi to them. Very good. Okay. All right. You guys are a chatty bunch. I have a clock here. Got to keep it going. All right. Game's very simple. The game's very simple. I'm going to give you choices. You'll make them in your head, and based on your choices, you'll either sit down or not, okay? First choice, in your head, just pick one. Seattle or Portland? No, don't say it, don't say it. It's all right. Common mistake. If you spoke, you should sit down. I'm serious, sit down, you're out. This is a tough game, sit down. I know more, you said Seattle. Now, maybe you're telling me that people from Seattle are just liars. Is that really what I live in Seattle, so. All right, I'll give you a second chance. Same thing, don't say a word, okay? Actually, I have a list of these things, because otherwise I'm gonna name lots of things off the top of my head, which would be bad. Let's do Germany or Argentina. Just in your head, pick one. I have no idea what he said. But you, sir, definitely need to sit down. No question about it. All right. If in your head you chose Germany, sit. All right. Winnowing the field, I like it. Next one. Tastes great or less filling? In your head, just pick one. Tastes great or less filling? If you chose tastes great, sit down. Wow. All right. Clearly, World Domination Summit, you guys are a bunch of hedonists. All right. I am with my people looking forward to the closing party. This will be good. Gluten-free or extra gluten? Anybody? Gluten-free, extra gluten? Gluten-free, sit down. Nobody went for gluten-free, all right. All right, I need to pick up the pace here. So if you are not down here on the floor, sit down. So everybody in the cheap seats, sit. You're done. Yeah. I know where you live. I know where you live. You gave it away. All right. So we have, I don't know, there's maybe 100 people left. So this is like the semifinal round. You guys are doing well. Let's go a little faster now. Let's just do apples or oranges. If you chose apples, sit down. Interesting. Glass half full, glass half empty. If you chose glass half full, sit down. We're down to like 10 people now. Okay? Getting exciting. What else do I have? I can't read my own handwriting. Okay, I got another one. Monsanto or Exxon? If you pick Monsanto, sit down. You guys know how I'm working this, don't you? All right, I got to pick up the pace. Let's do A or B. If you chose B, sit down. Couple you. All right. 1 or 2. If you chose 1, sit down. There's 2 of you left. If I can't see you, by the way, you need to sit. Sorry. Everybody back there. I never said the rules were fair. It's entirely arbitrary. So there's 2 of you left. Look at each other. Stare each other down. Okay. Very good. Last question. Extra cheese or no cheese? If you chose extra cheese, take a seat. Nobody? You're still up? All right. Let's do A or B. Did I do this already? Yeah. Shit. X or Y? Thank you. I know the alphabet. X or Y? X, sit down. Who are you people? They're cousins? All right. Both of you, come up here. Actually, you can stay there. So you guys win a pack of my books, all signed. You can split them between you. Thank you. All right. Thank you all for playing our little game. So, the bias. So let me finish the story. So that game, right? Let's assume that game was actually for something valuable, not my books. Something really valuable. $1 million, a new car, that house on Lake Travis. And it was a big competition. Winners got $1 million. And that would mean there'd be a media here. The journalists want to interview the winners. The winners, they want to, how'd you do it? What was your secret? How did you come up with the answers? And everyone would want to know the answers. A narrative bias, we like those stories. What did they do different? How did they prepare? How did they train? And then maybe they'd be on TV, they get a book written about them, they'd write a book, The 7 Secrets, Killer Secrets for winning at Berkun's crazy, weird game. And we would follow, we would be into it. That's what's called survivorship bias. Survivorship bias is the predilection we have for winners and believing there's some magical reason why certain people win and certain people fail. The game I played with you just now was really entirely random. It really was. It doesn't feel that way to you because you had to think about your choices. I didn't have to think about your choices at all. I know that no matter what pairs I offer you, eventually half of you and less of you are going to have to sit. If we did it by coin flipping, the same thing would be true. But we would applaud the winner. Like, what is that? That's not rational. That's emotional. That's part of why we're compelled to love stories. Now, I'm not saying the reason why everyone is successful or failed is entirely luck-driven. I don't believe that. But luck and randomness is at play in all creative ventures. That's cool. I don't know why I got a round of applause for luck, but I feel very lucky that I did. Okay. So, what does this mean then? What does this tell us? Well, the thing for me that I had to tell myself as a writer, someone who wanted to try to write, as I learned all this and try to understand all of this, was that I can do everything right as a creator and still fail if I define failure by some external valuation. Being a bestseller, getting a good review from a particular person, because all those things are really out of my hands. And we don't like to tell stories like that because they don't fit our narrative biases. The most popular books about creativity are not going to talk about that. But you don't have to do very much research or work to uncover the real truth about all of these things. One of my favorite stories about this is about The Great Gatsby, a classic book of literature. Most people don't know that Fitzgerald died thinking his work would be forgotten. In 1940, when he died, it was not a popular book anymore. Most books' popularity, even if they're bestsellers in 1 year, fades away and are forgotten. That's just the nature of making stuff. And I know that as a writer, and I accept that. The reason why The Great Gatsby is a book all of us read in high school is because in 1945, the US Army had this program to give GIs works of literature. And in part because The Great Gatsby was not that popular book, the rights to it were probably easy to acquire, and they gave 100,000 copies of it away to GIs returning from the war. 100,000 copies. That put The Great Gatsby back into the cultural zeitgeist, and it transformed the reputation of Fitzgerald. That's why we know his name. There's many stories like this. The reason why someone's successful or not, it's out of the hands of the creator. I wrote a book called The Myths of Innovation in 2007. It was a popular book, but it wasn't amazingly popular. At one point, a year later, one of my editors gave that book to someone she knew who was a journalist who happened to write for the New York Times every now and then. She wrote an article for the New York Times that mentioned me in a paragraph. It just so happened that a producer for CNBC was working on a show about innovation. They wanted a co-host for the show. They called me up and said, "Do you want to be on the show?" I'm like, "I am a writer. You want to put me on TV?" "Yes. Of course." But did I make that happen? Not really. There were 20 or 30 other authors who wrote books that were just as good as mine about creativity. They'd been writing about creativity for decades and long periods of time. Any one of them could have fit the bill to have been written about in the article and have been chosen. It just happened to be me. But no one wants to say that. They're not going to announce me on the TV show and say, "Here's just some guy we found who wrote a book in creativity, and he's our host. That's what we think of you." No, they want to amp it up. And what author would reject being amped up? So there are these patterns that are lurking that explain the outcomes of creative work. Now, it's hard to find good examples of creativity that tell you the honest story of what it's like to make stuff. And one of my favorite examples is shown here. It's this film called The Mystery of Picasso. Unlike all these narrative biased stories about creation, this is actually a film that's all that it does is show you Picasso at work. And I want to show you a short 1-minute piece preview of that film. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what it means and what it is after. That's quite an entrance, isn't it? So let me tell you a little bit about what you just saw. So the goal of the film was to try to capture sort of what I'm after. Obviously, Picasso didn't know what I was thinking because I hadn't been born for another 40 years. But he was trying to capture the reality of what it is to make. So we made a bunch of artwork. They filmed it from underneath and over his shoulder, like Bob Ross style, trying to capture what does Picasso experience when he's making a painting. And if you watch the film, it is actually an astonishingly boring film. But if you want to learn about how to create stuff, it is incredibly valuable. Because you realize, again, even if you're Picasso and you're a genius, everyone wanted to see him like epiphany, cubism, and just like everything happening like a Michael Bay film, again, exciting, popping drama. It's really just a guy sitting and working. And what do you think it's like to watch me or any famous writer write a book? It's someone sitting and working, typing, thinking, typing, maybe a shot of vodka, typing, thinking. It's not that exciting. The idea part is certainly interesting, and there are moments that are fun and enjoyable, but the process looks like work, and it looks like uncertainty. A lot of the paintings in this film aren't very good. Most artists would never let anyone see their work not being good. Michelangelo made lots and lots of sketches to plan what he was going to do before he sculpted, and he burned them all. He didn't want anyone to know this hidden secret that all creators have, that they have to do the work. And so for me, and the lesson for you, he shows up every day, just like the Yoko Ono painting. He shows up every day, Picasso does, knowing he has to be vulnerable to make the stuff. That's what the job of being a creator is getting up on that stepladder, feeling a little unsure, and doing it anyway. All the paintings made in this film were destroyed. The goal being the film itself would be the representation of this work. And so the lesson for me that I think about, I'm a successful author. This is what I do for a living. I've written 5 books. Many of them are popular. I know that no matter how many books I write, every time I sit down to make something new, that means it's unknown, it's uncertain. I'm going to be at the ledge. No matter how good the idea is, it's not about the quality of the idea. I'm going to be there because it's new. And I have to be comfortable with that. And the solution for you, not the solution for you. I can't offer you a solution. The whole notion of creativity is really about how the personal way you develop ideas. That's why there's no toolkit that can perfectly work for everybody. The way you find the answers to your problems is going to be unique to you. But I can tell you, out of all the work that I've done, the best advice I can give you is something very simple. It's something very simple. And the simple thing is that when you listen to yourself, we grow up and we have these voices that are very loud for us. Voices that tell us what to do. I want to be the king of France today. So you go and you make a puppet of the king of France. You play with, you make a space world. You make a new creature. We are totally in that voice. The voice inside us, that creative voice. But as we get older, there's more and more other voices that we want to listen to. We want to fit into society. We want to fit into culture. Our parents, our teachers. We want to get into college, so we have to apply and fit into boxes. And then we get a job, and we have a boss, then we have a spouse and their in-laws, and all these voices telling us, and voices that get into our head that are very loud voices. The little voice inside us gets very quiet. So the lesson for you, the advice for you, the thing I can tell you that's the way to find your soul and develop it, and it's the solution to the problem of what do you do when you're doing the work and it doesn't feel right, is this. Whenever you do hear that voice, and it may be when you go for a jog or when you're in the shower, assuming that you bathe in some way, maybe it's in the bathtub, it's all good as long as you're showering. When you hear that voice, you have to choose to honor it, and you honor it by listening to it. One tradition you'll find in almost every creative field is people keep journals. When you get an idea for a movie, a play, a business idea, whatever, write it down somewhere. Journal, diary, put it down, write it down. Don't judge it, don't think it, but put it down somewhere that's just for you. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook don't count because there's other people consuming it. And your relationship with your creative soul is about your relationship with you. You need a place that just you look at your ideas. Come back the next day, add something more, add something more. And if you do that, it's a very simple habit. If you find you're afraid to write your own ideas down in a place that only you see, your problem is not creativity. Your problem is you need therapy. Why are you afraid of what is in your own head? How can you possibly expect to be a maker of stuff if you're afraid of what's your own ideas? But assuming you do it, a month goes by, 6 weeks, you can now flip through it and there's a manifestation of what's in this subconscious, what's in your intuition. It's there on the page. And you can flip through it, your analytical brain that's useless when you're trying to get yourself to trapeze out over the water. But when you're sitting there, you can go, wow, I didn't realize I thought about this thing almost every other day. I had no idea I thought about it so much. Let me think about it some more now. I can put it together. Maybe there's a project now, something I can build, something I can do. And when you honor that voice, it gets louder. It gets more articulate. You get better at understanding what it means. That relationship with yourself gets stronger and stronger. And it starts out as just a little kindling, this little voice. Yes, this little voice. When you listen to it, it gets louder. It's being heard. Yes, 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 yeah. It becomes this powerful thing that's inside of you. And it's yours, that you built and you grew. And when the day comes, you sit down and do the work. You got inspired at an event like this. You got inspired. You read a book. You heard a story. You're suffering from all kinds of narrative bias. But you're excited, and you start a project, and you're working. And then when you're stuck, that's when you rely on this relationship you've built with your creative soul. That's when it will speak to you. And the thing that it's most likely to say is you need to just do it anyway. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks of it, because you know that your judgment of what you've made is really the only one that matters if you expect to do this kind of work for a long period of time. It's going to say, yes, do it anyway, do it anyway, do it anyway. Only you can listen to that voice. You can't get it from a guru or a book or a lecture, or in this case, a presentation at World Domination Summit. So that's my last slide. I want to thank you for listening to me, and I'll see you guys at the closing party. Thanks. Thank you.